I'd like to call the meeting to order of the December 4th Transportation, Mobility, and Infrastructure Commission. And please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, are there any presentations this evening by staff? No. Any commissioner communications we want to report? Does not appear so. No presentations. The first item on the consent agenda is the minutes from the last meeting of September 11th. Do I have a motion to approve those? Or any comments?
Motion to approve.
Are you a second?
See, may I vote if I wasn't here at the meeting?
Yes.
Oh.
Okay, I think we had a second for that, or did we? I guess not.
I can
Okay.
second it.
Okay, we have a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No? So moved. Let's see, we have the establishment of the calendar for next year for our commission, which is attached as a resolution. Any questions or comments from staff or anybody? No comments. I know that I have a conflict, the first two meeting dates. Let's see, that would be,
January 8th and March 5th.
right, so I won't be able to attend those two meetings, but I'm good for the rest of them, so.
Okay.
Mr.
So-
Chair, would you like to propose a different meeting? It's not necessarily set in stone for that date. If
Okay.
it pleases the commission, we could always go into the next week.
Right.
Typically, it seems that Mondays seem to work for the
Sure.
commissioners, but if you'd like to propose a different date, we're happy to entertain.
Well, the fifth, would it be the 15th, which I believe is the three-day weekend, right? The Martin Luther King weekend?
I believe so.
15th of January, so we'd have to go the following Monday probably.
Or if there's an alternate day that the
Or-
commissioners agree.
I think we should probably stick to Mondays, but,
I'll have to check the calendar for the city council
Okay.
chambers. So let me check that.
okay, yeah, so maybe that's an option, is the 22nd. Otherwise, we can just go ahead and approve it.
But they have not posted
Okay,
2018.
all right.
calendar.
Well, I mean, maybe that's something you can take a look at, but maybe we can go ahead and approve it now, subject to a possible change in
That's
it.
fine, and then
meeting.
at the meeting on January 8th, they could have, commissioners can have a decision
Okay.
to change.
I make a motion to accept as written in 17-2.
Okay, very good. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So moved. Okay, on the irregular agenda, we have an update on the City Traffic Committee.
Good evening, Commissioners. The purpose of this report is to just provide the Commission with some information on the administration of the City Traffic Committee. And the Traffic Committee predates the establishment of the TMI Commission, so it's necessary at this time to clarify the relationship between these two entities. So the purpose of this report is to both revisit the roles and responsibilities of the traffic committee as set forth by the municipal code, and to confirm the appropriate structure and process for continued reporting and engagement with the TMI Commission. So the city established the traffic committee in 1988 to serve as a regular forum for coordination and oversight of traffic engineering, safety, and enforcement issues. And the membership of the traffic committee is defined by municipal code to include the chief of police, director of public works, and the fire chief or any of their designees. An exhaustive list of the activities that fall under the purview of the traffic committee is listed in your staff report, particularly in attachment 1, straight out of the municipal code. But generally, the traffic committee is responsible for the administration and enforcement of traffic regulations, reviewing and authorizing the placement of certain types of traffic control devices and signs throughout the city, coordinating interdepartmentally on traffic studies and major transportation projects, receiving and responding to comments and complaints on traffic matters from the public, as well as making recommendations to City Council on ways to improve traffic conditions and enforcement throughout the city. So the Traffic Committee has actually been dormant since the creation of the TMI Commission, and historically was held as a public meeting, kind of subject to the Brown Act, although it is not technically subject to the Brown Act. So moving forward, this committee is only proposed to be operating at the staff level, since TMI Commission now serves as that formal channel for the public to make comments on transportation projects. With increasing volume of transportation projects and engagement from the public over the past few years, staff conducted a review internally to reconvene the traffic committee, since it hasn't been meeting for the past few years, particularly as we're seeing this as a more effective way to communicate and coordinate on projects across departments, fire and police, as well as to address those concerns that we're getting from the public. So the process that's discussed in your staff report and summarized in the flow chart that's on attachment 2 illustrates the role that traffic committee will be playing, which is consistent with those powers and duties already set forth by the municipal code, but seeks to clarify better the relationship to the TMI Commission. So as shown in that flow chart, the traffic committee is going to be generally meeting on a monthly basis or as needed to review transportation projects, receive comments and complaints from the public, and review other related issues as noted by city planning, engineering, fire, or police staff, all of which would fall under the authority of the traffic committee to address. And then specifically, as traffic-related issues are received, the traffic committee would be responsible for conducting a review and analysis in order to develop recommendations about these projects. So some of these issues may be addressed immediately if they fall within the authority of the traffic committee. So for example, if there's complaints of speeding on Southport Parkway, then police can recommend and immediately implement some additional traffic enforcement out there. But other types of projects will require additional levels of review. So for example, larger scale infrastructure recommendations based on a resident complaint is something that would get reviewed and analyzed for the severity of the problem by the traffic committee, and then added onto an ongoing list, which would be regularly prioritized and then submitted to TMI Commission for consideration and City Council for an ultimate determination. So based on that prioritization, on a roughly quarterly basis, we would be coming to the TMI Commission to provide a policy review. So to be clear, the TMI Commission is not being asked to make additions or modifications to the list based on project level characteristics, but what we would really be coming to you for is to review the list and in order to ensure that its priorities are reflecting the broader city policies and goals and objectives. So if you were to see it fit, the TMI Commission could make recommendations to modify the prioritization of the list to better align with city goals, or could even give guidance on the criteria by which the traffic committee is conducting these prioritizations. But essentially, we're just not asking you to submit projects for addition to the list or that type of thing. Each year, to coincide with the biennial budgeting process, staff would then be taking that prioritized traffic committee list of recommended projects to the City Council alongside any formal recommendations that were made by the TMI Commission on that prioritization. And at that time, the City Council could elect or decline to fund part or some of that recommendation list. And anything that is not funded at that time would just be rolled over into an ongoing recommendation list, and prioritizations would be continually refreshed and resubmitted to TMI Commission for ongoing consideration. So, in conclusion, this item is really just to inform the TMI of the existing municipal code, which established and authorizes the traffic committee to operate as described in your report, and to clarify the committee's duty to report and seek input from the TMI Commission as the committee does become more active in the future. So that concludes my update, and I can take any questions that you might have at this time.
Any questions for staff?
I have a couple questions. Thank you, Ms. Strand, for the presentation. To start, I guess my first question would be, was there something recently that prompted the city staff to think about reinvigorating the traffic committee? And my second question is, how will bringing the traffic committee back help to more efficiently serve the public?
So there's no single event that triggered the reconvening of the traffic committee, but more a cumulative effect going on, where we started to receive an increasing volume of comments, complaints, and suggestions from the public on different traffic-related issues. The way that those requests are being handled right now has historically been a little bit more ad hoc and piecemealed as they come through next request or received by phone or email, and somewhat inefficiently routed to the appropriate staff to kind of consider and analyze, and perhaps were not being addressed with a holistic view of all the different requests coming into the city. So the idea behind reconvening traffic committee is to really, well, first of all, become compliant with municipal code, and second to that, become more efficient at the staff level, as well as more effective at comprehensively addressing these requests that come in from the public on a citywide scale. So by meeting on a monthly basis, having all of the relevant departmental staff in one room to consider all of the complaints or suggestions that are being received alongside relevant transportation projects within the staff's purview, as well as other observations that are made by some of our key staff in police and fire, to get the big picture and help to inform that prioritization process and make really much better informed decisions on transportation projects.
So is the purpose then of the traffic committee monthly meetings not how my understanding is it was set up in the old days where it complied with the Brown Act even though it didn't have to, so there was public opportunity for input? Now would be a wholly staff level meeting with no public input?
Correct. Well, the exception to that would be that a large function of the traffic committee is driven by public input. So that's part of the basis of it, is receiving those public comments to begin with from next request or by other means, and addressing them.
But there'd be no opportunity for the public to make comments directly during the
Correct.
traffic
So-
committee?
Actually, could I,
since-
sorry, I'm going to jump in on that really quick. Jason McCoy, Supervising Transportation Planner, and I wanted to confirm that the reason for this is that the opportunity for public input is the TMI Commission. Transportation Mobility Infrastructure is in your purview. We're shifting the public comment from the internal communications that we're having between staff departments or departments and the staff of them to the public forum here. So instead of prior to this, we had actually agendized the items and we listed them in compliance with the Brown Act, but it was in a small meeting room inside of Public Works, which I think that and the staff agrees that this is a much more probably relevant venue for talking about different transportation-related items. So Sarah is correct. We are receiving a number, rightfully so, an increase in the number of traffic suggestions and complaints due to now we have increased economic activity. There's significant growth that's happening in the city, so those numbers of complaints and suggestions have increased. This forum actually provides a more appropriate venue, can actually hold a larger amount of people, and the role of the TMI Commission is reinforced by having the opportunity for public to engage directly with you.
And
Thanks.
I'll just add to that, the kind of secondary reason that it doesn't need to be subject to the Brown Act is because they're not legislating at traffic committee. It's really just implementing and enforcing existing regulation.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
I do,
Okay.
unless somebody wants to go before me. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know the legislative and municipal code, but municipal code starts with being discussed at open forum, I would guess. Reading the 10.0, I guess you're not taking suggestions, but I'm going to give you some ideas to think about. Traffic Committee powers and duties, in the section beforehand, it says it should be established consisting of chief of police, fire, and the representative director of public works. And it says the traffic administrator is the city manager. So while I understand that, it says it's consisting of, it doesn't say limited to. And then your very first title page introducing the subject, Municipal Code 1089 says, it shall be the authority of the traffic committee to oversee the duties. So how can the people on the committee oversee themselves is my first question. I have a problem with that. That also, to highlight other people's comments, is it sounds like you're bringing this inside without allowing public comment on a monthly basis, and we only meet quarterly. And I haven't ever had any, at least in my first 12 months now, had any opportunity to review any of these public comments. So transportation and traffic may be different. But I would say that to get more public interaction, going inside of a warehouse or a public works office complex over off the main thoroughfare is not very transparent. And I think I would have a problem with that as being a citizen of West Sacramento. Secondly is if you're basing it off of complaints coming in to your office and you want to get together, while I think that's a very great idea, I think we have lots of traffic issues that need to be addressed, especially up and down Jefferson. How would I know that they're being addressed? There's no way of being told. Do I get a letter back saying that we've talked about it in a meeting and here's the response? Because your flow chart says immediate action can be taken with or without TMI Commission feedback. So maybe we're only part of the general plan, the projects and maybe prioritizing the projects, but your traffic committee from being at staff level, I think contradicts what it says where it says it's supposed to be overseen of those few individuals. And that's kind of, and if you used to do it as a courtesy, great, thank you. Why would you change? It looks suspicious. That's where I'm kind of getting at.
So let me go back to your first comment first and just clarify, are you citing attachment 1, the actual municipal code language?
Well, you have attachment 1, 10 point everything in there, and then your title page, item 4 on the agenda report. One under background, 4th paragraph, it shall be the authority of the traffic committee to oversee the duties of the city traffic administrator and chief of police. So they're two different things how I read it. The
Okay.
committee oversees those people who are on the traffic committee. So maybe it just is a way of interpreting it, maybe, perhaps, fine.
Sure.
But I think going back, it originally is, it looks like you guys, not you guys, but the city is looking to counter the public comment by taking it more in-house when it should be way it used to be if you're going to do it.
So to your first comment, we'll definitely follow up with the city clerk's office. We did review all of this with them, but the language on oversee we'll look into. On your second point, our purpose behind doing this is actually to make it more transparent and try to make this more accessible to the public. So right now, this committee is not actually even meeting, and the way that these public comments and complaints are being handled, I think, makes them less accessible to the public. And because of the TMI Commission's existence as a Brown Act subject formal commission, this is the appropriate place for us to be taking these comments and complaints, as well as other traffic-related issues, so that the commissioners can consider those and be made more aware of them, as well as provide a channel for public comment on that prioritized list on a regular basis, rather than it occurring simply at the staff level without any meeting occurring at all. So the traffic committee is really intended only to apply existing regulatory framework and staff expertise to consider what would it actually take to address that problem? What's the severity of that problem? Go collect some data on if somebody says there's a speeding issue on this corridor, actually getting some quantitative data to help inform our decision makers, as well as getting cost estimates. So if we do identify that, yeah, this intersection really does merit a deeper look, then have some engineers, look at some different solutions and cost it out so that we can inform our commissioners and our city council members to make those best decisions moving forward.
If I can add, the city staff already, on a daily basis, we receive different comments, different complaints. If we were to take every single complaint and every single comment to the public to ask their input on every decision we made, there would be very little that gets done. So there's a lot of decisions that get made at the staff level with just solving a problem, filling a pothole, for instance, or changing the timing on a signal or replacing a light bulb. All these things get done on a daily basis. What we're trying to do is extend this beyond just the project level, which originally the traffic committee was looking at larger projects and meeting together, police, fire, public works, community development, to discuss some of these issues surrounding it. And there was an opportunity, although not required, where we could notice these meetings to allow the public to come in. What we're doing now is shifting those meetings from that forum to this forum. And that's the intent for this, only we're also expanding it now, where through the West Sacramento Connect, the website which allows people to submit complaints, we're receiving a lot of recommendations, everything from build a new freeway, and we'd like to see it next month. We have received that comment, all the way to, it would be easier for us if you would change all the timing of the signals down West Capitol. So we receive a wide variety of things that range from completely impossible for the city to do from a budgetary standpoint or a policy standpoint, all the way to something that we can do tomorrow at a staff level and just take care of. So what the traffic committee does is internally, through this new change, is to allow us to kind of filter that stuff out and be able to solve the problems that we can solve immediately. Those problems that we cannot solve immediately that require additional financial resources, those will have to ultimately get forwarded to City Council for consideration through the CIP process. Those sorts of items, we would like the commission to actually review and prioritize. If you think it's worth it for the city to decide to change our policy and build a freeway in order to allow people to go to downtown faster, that's something that the TMI Commission could recommend to council, and we could allocate the additional funds for that. If you feel that that's less of a priority than, say, adapting, new transit signals that, provide for free flow of traffic, or allow additional pedestrian crossings across Jefferson, or something along those lines, that's some of the things that, we could do as well. So we're just looking for a way to integrate the TMI Commission, this commission, into the daily things that we receive, and to help us prioritize along our existing policies, what are the most important things for us to take to City Council to ask for funding for? And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do, while at the same time not burden the commission with things that we can accomplish on a day-to-day basis.
Quick question for you. I don't know, maybe this will be helpful to some of the commissioners, and I'm not trying to add any work to staff's plate here. I know you guys are busy anyways, but would it maybe be helpful to, maybe for you guys in this case and for us, if we had a scenario where, after each one of these monthly meetings, we just got kind of a, hey, here's kind of the, 5 main points we discussed, and in the lead up to our quarterly meetings, because you guys are meeting every month, right? So we kind of come into our quarterly meetings with, a better idea of what people are saying on the street, for instance, normal citizens, and then, we can kind of have a little more time to, even, thinking about freeways being built a month from now, right? Thinking about stuff like, at least we know kind of what's being said out there beyond what we hear in our own daily lives. So I don't know, maybe that's something that could be done too.
In response to that, we do have meeting minutes that we put together with every one of these meetings that we have, and I would be happy to forward those minutes to the commissioners.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I had just a quick one. So the basic function, it sounds like, of our commission relative to the Traffic Committee is to review, make recommendations, provide feedback on policy, and help on prioritizing recommendations. And my question, and I think that's a good idea, my question would be, have we done that before? Have we been getting a list of priority projects, or at least ones that staff are getting, because you're in a better position to compile that list. You're kind of the first line with our public. So I think that's a great idea, but I don't remember us doing that in the past. So am I correct in that this is kind of would be like a new role for us, or at least you would be preparing these periodically for us to take a look at?
I can allow Sarah to.
Yeah, that's correct, and that's exactly the purpose of this
Okay.
report, is because the Traffic Committee existed before TMI Commission was established, and since TMI was established, Traffic Committee hasn't been meeting. So staff clarified the process that's kind of set before you today in that flow chart as the best model for relating to the TMI Commission and providing the commissioners with an opportunity to provide policy feedback.
Great. And then, it would be helpful to find out, you said Connect West Sacramento, or whatever
West
your
Sac Connect.
methodology is to try to create priorities. That would be helpful too, is to know if there's relatively more interest, public interest in something that could be maybe added to the report.
Well, I could clarify that. The West Sacramento Connect is, you may remember the Comcate system. So we had a system before the current West Sacramento Connect. It was called Comcate, and it was an online system to allow the members of the public to send us some recommendations. Initially, it was for operations items, so it was filling potholes, striping roads. We still continue to get a lot of those requests, all the way to my neighbor is overwatering and there's water spilling out on the sidewalk. We get all kinds of requests. In our department, we try to handle everything that is transportation related, so it gets actually routed through city clerk's office, comes to different departments to try to handle. What we're seeing a lot of now recently is not operations requests, but actual infrastructure. People who are wanting, as I said, freeways, new traffic signals, stoplights, some things that, such as the stoplights and signals, are actually regulated through state law, so we can't ask the commission, for instance, hey, do you think we should put a stop sign in here? Well, that's something that staff has to do, that we have to follow our state law for that. But other infrastructure requests that right now, what staff has been saying is, hey, this is not actually in our CIP budget. This item hasn't been budgeted, but we'll take a note, and then we'll bring this through the proper channels to see if we can get some budgeting for this. So that's what we're trying to do now, is we've got a list started of these items that have been brought forward to us that we don't have the authority to just, or financial resources, just go out and build, that need a little additional direction. And so that's where this whole process kind of got invented. So we'll be able to provide you with a list already of many items that have been brought forward to us for consideration and prioritization.
And the other thing I'll mention to your comment is, in terms of the list of prioritized recommendations that will be brought to the TMI Commission on a quarterly basis,
Right.
those will be accompanied by an explanation or justification of that prioritization for consideration.
Okay, well, that's good. So your request really is for us to discuss this item and to provide comments, and I believe we've done so. So hopefully those will be forwarded on, and appreciate your report.
Great, thank you.
The next item is the presentation on the downtown riverfront streetcar station design. Staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's going to be my item here. So provided in your staff report is an overview of the current progress on the downtown riverfront streetcar project. I have a PowerPoint presentation that we're going to load up that just has a couple of maps, one that you've seen before as a refresher, and then a new map that shows where the station locations are, although the station locations haven't changed since the original approval of the project to move forward. So staff, in consultation with the property owners, project engineers, project partners, and appropriate relevant departments, have had initial discussions regarding the basic equipment and amenities that are going to be included in the downtown riverfront streetcar. Those would include ticket machines, basic lighting, information kiosks, as well as some additional amenities that may be recommended, including canopy shelters, public art, or opportunities for sponsorship. Jennifer, could you advance the slide for me, please? So this slide that you've seen, a little bit difficult to read, but it just basically shows a lot of the destination points that are located around the downtown Riverfront Streetcar project that's proposed. Everything from the West Sacramento City Hall all the way to the barn that was most recently constructed. Could you advance, please, the last slide? So this is a little bit closer shot that shows where the various stations are located. In the city of West Sacramento, we have a total of 6 station points. We do have one station, central station that's at City Hall. The remaining stations have both eastbound, westbound, or northbound, southbound stations. So the format that we're looking at in the interest of available space and limited budget is identifying different stations by their function, either as a destination station, a community station, or a smaller neighborhood station. The agenda report contains a description of these 3 types, as well as a listing of the location for each type and potential amenities that could be located at each station. What we're requesting from the commission pertaining to the station design are some opportunities and issues that staff could identify for us at different station locations, as well as the 3 types. If the commission feels that the 3 types that we've identified are sufficient for moving forward with community outreach, going out to the public, additional property owners, and having a full station workshop with the community. So I'm here to answer any questions and here to record any input that I receive from the commission.
Okay, any questions or comments?
I have a couple questions. Thank you, Mr. McCoy, for the presentation. The first question I have is noticing in the report that there's a potential for sponsorship opportunities for certain stations, but I couldn't find an example of those in the photos that were attached, so I was hoping you could elaborate on that.
Sure. This was, it's important to remember that we're dealing with 2 different jurisdictions. So the city of Sacramento and city of West Sacramento are both in this project. There are significantly more stations over in the city of Sacramento than ourselves, but there's equal opportunity for sponsorships, which could be, say, on the Sacramento side or even West Sacramento side. The Kings Arena is located near one of the stations, and they've already expressed interest in branding that station as the Kings Home Station. We have the barn here in our backyard. There is opportunity for our vendors at the barn to advertise using various color themes, texture themes, using just basic advertisement kiosks. So all of these things are opportunities for basic sponsorship. The sponsors could include benches that are specific characteristics. Say, at the Kings, the benches could say the Kings, or it could be in the purple color. It could be just about anything. We have not really gone and specified anything in particular because we really want the community to do that, to tell us what they would want to see in the stations. What we do know that we need to do with these stations is there needs to be a basic framework for the design. There needs to be some kind of identifying pylon or identifying characteristic that lets the public know that they are at a streetcar station. There needs to be a common theme through both jurisdictions so that it makes it easy for someone to locate where the ticket vending machine is. So that they'll be able to know that they can go to a certain kiosk and get information. The shelters themselves, where proposed, need to be a consistent theme across both jurisdictions so they're easily identifiable. Other than that, the sky's the limit as far as how both jurisdictions agree to move forward with theming of different stations and how they could be branded or potentially have sponsorship opportunities involved.
Great, thank you. And I agree. I think it's important to have a consistent theme across all the stations, and I like the idea of the iconic way markers. And when it comes to stations A or stations B, having public art or functional public art as well. But I noticed that for Station B, for example, which are, the medium-sized stations, but still rather large, that there's no mention, a kiosk is optional, but there's no mention of a bench or trash. And I was wondering, is that a price issue? Even for the Station A's, the trash cans and the benches are optional.
It could be a price issue. We have not gone through and looked at holistically, compared with the potential budget for these stations, how much of these amenities are actually eating away at the budget. So it's also a function of operation. So I will give you a case in point. In the Bridge District, there are some new homes or townhomes that are fronting along Riverfront Street. So having a grand station in that location that may include benches, et cetera, it may work or it may not. Having a bench in some locations actually encourages people to stay there and be there in front of a home, for instance. That may not be desirable for the developer, for instance, that's developing those areas. In some areas, like in Rayleigh Field, it is much more appropriate to have benches and the ability for people to wait longer term, since they'll be oftentimes leaving a game and they may have to wait for a couple of streetcar stops before they can get on if there's a large demand. In some of the neighborhood stations, it may or may not. It's going to be a matter of us meeting with the community, talking about what it is they want and don't want at certain stations. In place of benches, often at streetcar stops, there are leaning spots where you can lean against things, or you have something to help prop yourself up. Or maybe the benches are just smaller pods, for instance, that don't have a back to them, so that they're not designed for long-term relaxing, for instance. There's even things like Wi-Fi. You may want to include Wi-Fi, for instance, at a station like Rayleigh Field where people are posting their pics, but you don't necessarily want people at a smaller station just parking on a bench and sitting there using Wi-Fi all day. So there's various things that we need to talk to the community about, especially people that are around these stations, businesses, residents, people who use transit often. So once we get approval of the basic framework of how we're approaching these stations in context of 3 different varieties, it'll enable us to kind of put our arms around it, understand what it is people are looking for, and then start to identify what budget we have for each of these stations.
Thanks. And I just had one final question as well, and it's based off the slide here. I was hoping you could refresh my memory for the way the streetcar route will work. So we have the streetcar, for example, leaving from City Hall, going to the Rayleigh Field area, and then does the same streetcar always go down towards the barn and back up, or are those 2 different streetcar lines?
Actually, no. So what's going to happen is if you think of the City Hall section or the route and the Riverfront Street route, those are actually split. So whereas in Sacramento, in some stations, you'll have 15-minute headways. In the city of West Sacramento, what will happen is the train will go towards City Hall on one path, and they're going to meet up actually at Rayleigh Field, and then one will continue on down, the other one will continue going through. So there's actually going to be 30-minute headways for the City Hall station and for the Riverfront Street stations, with the exception of Rayleigh Field, which will have 15-minute headways the entire time.
In that case, just one suggestion for the station location and station types. It seems that the main route for streetcars coming from Sacramento is to cross over Tower Bridge, and the first stop the passengers would see would be that westbound stop at Tower Bridge Gateway and 3rd Street.
That's correct.
Which is currently identified as a Station B type. And I was thinking, just since that's the first station stop that anyone coming across the river will see from West Sacramento, that might want to be considered an A type, just like the eastbound direction.
So I'll give you a little background on that one. The reason for that, you know where Capitol Yards is in relation to that. There's a large slope that goes down, and the property there is not under the ownership of the city of West Sacramento. So that will require property acquisition for us to do that, as well as we have a little bit of a limitation with those large trees that are located there. So right now, economic development is looking into it. You did make the exact same comment that economic development team made, because we are aware that that is the first station that you'll see. That one is a matter of, can we do it from an engineering perspective, given the large slope that backs onto that, and how much property would be required if we were to make that an A station? A stations are meant to accommodate a large number of passengers. So we'll have to see exactly what we can do, but I will put that note down that that's something that you guys are interested in.
Great, thank you. I used to live at Capitol Yard, so I remember that slope well, and I
Yes.
appreciate the difficulties.
So for recommendations that the commission is making, so Mr. Chair, a formal recommendation on these would be definitely warranted here, and we'd love to see that.
Yes, sir.
Any other
Yeah,
questions?
quick question for for each one of these stations, really. So as far as the sponsors go and different companies or organizations that are going to advertise, has there been any talk or thought about how many you would have at each one? In other words, okay, like I get, for instance, the Kings would have, okay, it's going to be the Kings station, so it's just about the Kings, but what I'm thinking is, what if you had like, for instance, something here in West Sacramento around the barn would be you could be the barn station, and that would be the headline kind of sponsor, right? But within that, maybe through, digitally, for instance, right, every hour on the hour, you have it changed to a different company or group, just to generate as much income as you possibly can, right, to help with maintenance, operating costs, that sort of a thing. So I don't know if there's been any talk of that yet.
Honestly, no. We're at just a very beginning stage. We have discussed the streetcar sponsorship in general. The streetcar itself, in Cincinnati, it's the Cincinnati Bell streetcar. So you've got the telephone company there is sponsoring the entire streetcar, and they provide certain revenue that goes along with that. It could be just like Sleep Train was the arena there. You've got the Golden One Center. So it's just like anything. If it's moving, or if it's a public and highly visible, there's opportunities. But of course, with everything, you want to make sure that it fits within the design criteria the city is looking for, that it does not obstruct with the true purpose of the whatever it is. So as the station, you don't want a lot of advertisements that could potentially be blocking things like the information kiosk, et cetera. So all these things would have to be taken in consideration, but anything is possible.
Okay. Thank you.
I think when I met you in December of last year, you were wondering about the Trump budget and the proposal of the rail cars. Has that been budgeted? Are you budgeted to do this plan?
So we're expected to receive our full funded grant agreement by the end of the second quarter of next year. Right now, we are working with the Federal Transit Administration. They have a consultant that is working directly with us on behalf of the FTA to make sure that all of our items are responded to in accordance with the FTA's requirements. So right now, we're looking very good. So our full expectation is to be moving forward. The JPA, the Riverfront JPA, has been formed and has had its first meeting. So they're the entity that's responsible for the ownership and operation of the streetcar itself. That is chaired by Councilman Hanson from Sacramento. It's co-chaired by Mayor Christopher Cabalden here. And they're right now seeking the fifth board member. So at the next JPA meeting, my assumption is that they're going to be nominating that board member. As far as our financial commitments, we have 97% of the local funding in place, $35 million from the city of West Sacramento. We have the $30 million from the state. We have a total of $9 million that's been committed by the city of Sacramento. $2 million of it went to early project development. The other $7 allocated by City Council toward the project. The only thing that we're awaiting right now is the $3 million in funding from the county, which I understand is going to be fully committed in just a matter of weeks. So as far as the FTA is concerned, when you have 50% of the total project budget in local funds that are committed, it's very, very good for the project. So we don't have any reason to believe we won't receive that grant agreement.
And is it both legs of the West Sacramento, the riverfront, and the City Hall version? Because I think the last time we heard about it, the barn version was still on the hopeful list.
So the additional funding, so there was a $10 million shortfall that you're recalling. CFD 27, which is the West Sacramento Bridge District CFD, is actually allocated directly by the property owners in the Bridge District, a total amount of $10 million to go toward the streetcar project. That is completely fulfilled.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Yeah.
So I'm just looking at this map, and are some of the stations for the cable car in the same spot as the light rail?
So yes, our regional transit is the grant recipient for some of the funding by the FTA. The project itself is a project of the two cities, but the anticipated operator for a minimum of 5 years will be Regional Transit, as they are the only transit entity that currently provides rail service in our region. So that is a requirement of the Federal Transit Administration. So yes, the project itself would be entering into an agreement to lease use of the track, Regional Transit's track, in certain key areas.
Oh, but are some of the stations the same?
Some of the stations will not be the same. Well, actually, none of the stations will be the
Okay.
same.
Okay.
But you may be in the same location, but there would have to be different platforms because the proposed streetcar is actually going to be low floor boarding. So at this point, we're not sure what the percentage of that low floor boarding is. There aren't any 100% low floor vehicles, meaning no steps to get up currently that I know of in the U.S. Most of the time, they're about 70% low floor, meaning that you can just step right off of the sidewalk right into the vehicle. There are certain constraints that we have to follow as far as the development of the streetcars themselves. And currently, we have received bid or bids. I'm not sure at this time. Regional Transit received bids for producing the streetcar vehicles. And so there's going to be a process for reviewing those proposals for technical compliance, and then eventually there will be selecting of the streetcar manufacturer. At that time, we'll know if they're low floor boarding or not, and we'll know exactly where the doors are going to go and how the stations will be configured based on that. So it's one of those things where we have to consider a lot of different factors, but the actual light rail vehicles are out there, you'll see that they have high platforms, or you have to step up from the sidewalk and get upstairs to get up in them. So that's a completely different boarding situation than what you'll have with streetcar. It'll be a much easier on and off experience.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess I was just wanted to make sure that people would know, oh, this is a streetcar, not
Yes.
just rail, but I guess the wayfinding would help with that. To distinguish it.
Wayfinding, branding, the streetcar vehicles are significantly smaller than light rail vehicles, so it's definitely something that you'll be able to tell the difference. And it's just something in the design and the way that we orient the stations and the information that we provide that will tell people these are two different systems.
Okay, thank you.
Yet to be determined. So we'll have to go out to the public for information on how to make that happen the best.
Any other questions? I was in Portland during the summer, and I thought they had a really excellent comprehensive transit system. I took the streetcar, I walked a lot, I took light rail from the airport. I never needed a car. And one of the things that I felt was that they had really good mode transfer, meaning you could go from a light rail train to a streetcar relatively easy because you had information about the transfer. And so I think my question has more to do with making sure that the system works well in an integrated way with some of the other modes. It could be car, and it could be maybe we need to identify some parking relative to some of these locations, particularly where it's a destination, because the mode might be from car to streetcar as opposed to light rail to streetcar. And then, but also just in terms of the signage, and one of the things they had there was a reader board, which, you know, it basically told you when the train was coming. So, because I think it's going to be important to have reliability, particularly when this thing gets started, you know, for people to use it, they're going to have to know that it works and that it's on time. So I would encourage in your, whether, I don't know if it's called wayfinding or what it is, but you have information both in terms of how to transfer from one mode to another, whether it's nearby parking lots or nearby light rail stations. And then the other thing is a reader board that gives you some information on timing, so you know either the next streetcar is going to be in 5 minutes, or if you want to transfer to a light rail in downtown somewhere, maybe you get some understanding or information about how that ties in. So you can literally take the streetcar from light rail in Folsom or something, you know. So those are basically my comments on your design. But any other questions or comments?
If the chair could request a
do you want a
formal
motion?
recommendation. Yes, please.
Yeah, okay, well, I'll make a motion to, I don't know if we're approving, but we're giving direction to city staff on, what is this called? Streetcar to station design with incorporating the comments that we provided at our meeting. Can I get a second for that?
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so moved. And it looks like that's pretty much it on the regular agenda. Let's see, okay, again, we have the calendar. Do we need to make a motion? I thought we already made a motion to approve the calendar for next year.
No, I think we've already done that one.
So that's been covered. Any reports from city staff?
Yeah, actually, I do have a report. At the September meeting of the commission, it was requested, I believe by the vice chair, to have a presentation given on the effectiveness and utilization of parking meters in the Bridge District. I brought that to our Economic Development Department, and the request that they came back with was, they requested the commission clarify specifically what information the commission is seeking to help staff narrow the presentation and provide the right information.
Sure. Seeing as I was the commissioner who requested that item, I can elaborate a little bit on it. When I originally made that request at the last meeting, I was hoping that since the parking meters have been up and running since beginning of June or beginning of July, if the city staff could give a presentation of how often those meters have been utilized since they became operative, just because I know that there aren't currently too many events at the barn outside of weekly or monthly events, and I know that starting in the winter, hopefully in the spring, there'll be a permanent business there, there'll be more business. But I wasn't sure at this time, since there isn't a consistent draw, if those parking meters are being utilized, and if maybe the city was a little premature in making them operative before there were enough attractions in the area.
Okay, I'll communicate that to Economic Development. And then I believe it would be Katie Jacobson, who she represents largely the Bridge District, the planning that was done there. At this time, I know the city is looking toward hiring a parking administrator in order to specifically address some of the parking issues surrounding the city. We have not fulfilled that role yet. I don't even know if we've advertised for that yet, but Economic Development could probably get you all the information that you're looking for.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other reports?
No more reports.
Okay, the next item is any future agenda requests from the commission. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Oh, excuse me. Anybody have any thoughts on future items for
Yeah,
the
I
commission?
would
I would really like to hear what might be happening with bicycle infrastructure plans that I know have been in the works for some time, but some sort of update might be nice.
I can tell you that Chris Doherty, who is leading up our efforts on the update to our bike master plan, is planning on coming to the commission in, I believe, February of next year. The consultant has been working very diligently on that planning, and we've also integrated a few other items into that under direction of our executive team. So we will be bringing a full report on that in February. Unfortunately, we wouldn't be ready to do that in January for the regular meeting, so it's probably going to have to be a special meeting.
Okay, that's acceptable by me. Thank you.
Great.
Any other items? No?
So I don't know if this would be included in the master plan, but with bike sharing, is that part of that?
Yep, that's
Okay,
part of
that's
it.
what I was wondering. Okay.
And actually, we will have an update on the electric-assisted bicycles. So we'll be able to give you a little bit more of a report on the status of that.
Okay, thank you.
Will that report also include stats on how many people are actually using the bicycles, specifically in the West Sacramento stations?
I can request that.
Sure.
Yeah.
One other question. The train, the train we were just discussing, it was at one point, I think, going to go north and go over the I Street Bridge, replacement bridge that's going to be built within some amount of years. Is that something where it can be expanded upon, the train that's going to be built that currently would go over the Tower Bridge? At one point, I think it was planned to go north and up over the...
So the streetcar project has multiple phases. The first phase of it is the starter line, which is the map that you just saw a little while ago in front of you. There's another extension that is proposed to occur to the north that would connect the Rail Yards District over the new C Street Rail Yards Bridge, which will be completed by 2022. That is going to be a streetcar-ready or rail-ready, transit-ready bridge with the appropriate infrastructure to be able to hold the track. There's a proposed station on C Street that would be at C and 4th, as per the Washington Realized planning document that was brought forward, I think, about 2 years ago, which is currently online. You can check that out. Right now, the Washington-specific plan is currently underway, utilizing the Washington Realized planning document as its basis. That still plans to incorporate streetcar down to 5th Street and then cut through to 3rd Street, which would then join onto the first leg at Raley Field. There's also another extension which would connect from the Bridge District all the way down South River Road into the future Pioneer Bluff area, and eventually over the Broadway Bridge, which is currently in the planning process. That will be a streetcar-ready bridge, which will connect to City of Sacramento's planned Broadway extension of the streetcar project. So the 2012 streetcar master plan prepared by the City of Sacramento shows where their connections are and ultimately how we're going to connect here in the City of West Sacramento as well. I can't give you a time frame for that because we just really want to get this first phase built, and then after that we'll start focusing on the extensions.
Any other thoughts?
I'll ask one question, just since bridges were mentioned. Any updates on the Broadway Bridge from, I guess, mostly on our side of the river, worth noting?
Sure. So the Broadway Bridge Tiger-funded grant project, it's for project preliminary engineering and environmental clearance. Right now, we're in about 10% design, so that's just some initial design concepts and alignments. Right now, we have 4 alignments that were advanced from the feasibility study. All 4 of those are feasible, and they're being advanced into the environmental document for the Broadway Bridge. We've had a number of environmental consultants out investigating all these alternative sites for biological resources to determine whether or not there's any endangered species or if there's any environmental items of significance that need to be included in the environmental document. It's happening on both sides of the river. Although on City of Sacramento, all the alignments go to one spot, that's Broadway. So there's a little bit more work happening on the West Sacramento side. In conjunction with that, the Pioneer Bluff area is currently undergoing some preliminary planning to see exactly how that's going to advance. I believe you got a report from Katie Yancey at our last meeting on the progress of that. So the staff is working together to figure out the best way to incorporate the planning for Pioneer Bluff with the future bridge. So that project, it's going to be another year of analysis, and then we're really going to start digging into reducing those alternatives to the most environmentally significant or less significant alternative, preferred alternative as they call it. All of these are going to be taken to both your commission and to the city council as we start seeing significant progress, including any public meetings or release of the environmental document.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other items? I wanted to mention one that I'm dealing with right now. There's a lot of infrastructure work being done by Tykert within the Washington neighborhood. And I believe they're putting in a new sewer line, water lines, putting in new sidewalks in some cases. And Tykert basically posted a notice on each of our doors that said, we're starting on whatever it was, December 27th. And then the jackhammer started about 8 o'clock in the morning right across the street from me. So I guess my question is, in terms of the city, because I asked Tykert to raise this with the city, because that single notice, when I started asking questions, he basically told me it's a 6-week project. So my question was really public noticing for infrastructure within the city where you have a contractor like Tykert doing the work. And they post a notice that says, we're starting on the 27th. But I felt that was completely inadequate particularly because it's jackhammering streets and, you're right there in the middle of a residential area. I'd like the city to do some more specific public noticing around its construction activities, especially if you have a 6-week project. I think there was a notice, I want to say there was a notice maybe a month ago that said something to the effect that this whole 10-block area is going to be subject to work. But I didn't feel that was very adequate for people. So I don't know if it's a report back. I don't know if it's an agenda item. It could be just further clarification. Probably the city code says X and you do the minimal. But I don't think that's adequate when you're working in a neighborhood like we live in with that much activity and that much noise. It's primarily noise. And they are starting about 8 o'clock. They say they can start at 7 and then they can continue until 7 at night. I'm not saying they're doing it the whole time, but they're starting really early. So I would request public noticing, more adequate public noticing. I don't know what the practices of the city, but I think something more specific, either about timeframes or about specific impacted areas within a very large project area. That would be that's one kind of category of stuff. I'm also aware, I went to the bridge, or the bridge meeting, the last meeting, I know you were at it as well, and I'm kind of envisioning in the future, especially where I live, with the construction of that bridge, there's going to be significant construction activity as well. So it's kind of like, we're kind of in, where I'm living is kind of ground zero in terms of a lot of the work that the city is doing right now. So I'm kind of sensitive to this. I've heard from my neighbors as well. So I wanted to throw that out. Maybe that becomes a discussion item for a future agenda. Maybe we need to give some direction on that. I just feel like the noticing is pretty minimal right now.
And so I can speak to the I Street Bridge. What you're discussing is modifying the municipal code to make changes to allowable construction. That's It's not quite in the purview of this commission, it's more of the,
I don't think I was requesting modification of the construction so much as better information provided by the city to the neighbors
I'd be certain to pass that on.
of what the anticipated schedule is, of what the anticipated impact areas are. So it could be a map, it could be, in other words, Phase 1, these two streets, January 1st to February 15th, which is basically what they're doing out there now, or they will, excuse me, I think now it's December 4th through January 15th. I probably should be planning vacations during that period, but I'm just saying that unless you give notice to the neighbors, they don't really know really what's happening other than this big area where a lot of work's being done. So it's more specificity on the notice so that people know roughly when they're going to be working on particular sub-areas. And, you know,
I'll pass that on.
Yeah.
This is not a project that, I'm aware of it,
Yeah.
but it's outside of my realm, so I
Okay.
can't speak to any specifics
It's-
on it. But I can talk to the construction management team and ask them about this project and see if I can't get some more information. And then I'll discuss with the leadership about the appropriate venue to discuss noticing procedures and whether or not that's best suited in the TMI Commission or if that's something that
or
needs to go.
just direct Tykert to your, the Tykert's has a contract with the city of West Sacramento. They're doing the work on behalf of the city. So, I mean, he told me on the phone what they were doing. It just wasn't represented in any way on any notice that any of my neighbors knew about. So I would, you know, it could be Tykert that provides the notice, just more specific notice about what they're doing. You know, I'm not sure the municipal code needs to be modified to do that. But I just know we're starting on kind of a major, we've just talked about a whole bunch of infrastructure here. There's a lot of stuff going on all over the city that's going to be impacting, you know, neighborhoods and sort of impacting us. I think part of the work, as I understand it, is maybe they're doing some modifications to the street signs too for the parking program. I'm not sure about that, but it's just, you know, because of where I live, I see it. I've seen a lot of it right now, and I assume there are other areas of the city that would benefit from that, so. Yeah, it could be a report back, maybe at the next meeting or something, you can just give us kind of the basics of what the municipal code says, and then if you've had any meetings with Tykert, or whoever the responsible party is working with Tykert, maybe that could be communicated back to Tykert, that if they can provide notice, that would be helpful. So, thank you. I think because I'm not necessarily working, so I'm home all day, it gets pretty difficult, so. And I know they're going to be gone in 6 weeks, but that's a pretty substantial time. So, okay. Are there any other items for future meetings? Okay, great. Okay, well, not hearing any, I guess I adjourn the meeting.